Okay, so I need in this class to talk you through a few things. In SOF 6007, you would have made a web page, some HTML, CSS, and maybe some JavaScript. And that website lived on your machine, and you could look at it on your machine. You could maybe put it in Dropbox and have someone else look at it, but it wasn't out there. It wasn't out there on the web. No one else could see it. Now, obviously, if you're making a website, and it's the whole purpose of it is that someone could actually see it. So what we're going to look at in this class is how you might put it there. And it needs to be on what's called a web server. So a web server is a machine that's connected to the internet, and it spends its day fielding requests for files and serving them up. So someone says, can I have page1.html? It says, there you go. Can I have photo2.gif? It says, there you go. Can I have partypicture2.jpg? And it says, there you go. So it's a machine running some software that's connected to the internet and has the files attached to it. So traditionally it was one machine, one physical machine somewhere. And a small business might even have had that one machine in the corner somewhere. As things have scaled up though, it's not one physical machine anymore. Like there's no one physical machine in the world that could run Amazon. It would be huge. There's no one machine that could serve up Google's requests. So we still think of it as one machine, as a web server somewhere. And in some cases it is. In most cases it's not. In most cases, well, I don't know, most, some, whatever. But in many cases it's not one physical machine anymore. It's spread across the infrastructure in some way. If you were to take a look at the file names of your website that you did last semester, they may need some modification in order to make them work smoothly on a web server. Most web servers, or many web servers anyway, use case-sensitive file names, whereas Windows doesn't use case-sensitive file names. So Dan's page with an uppercase D and an uppercase P is the same as Dan's page with a lowercase d and a lowercase p in Windows, but on the web server they would be considered to be different files. So if you have a link to Dan's page with uppercase letters and your file is Dan's page in lowercase letters, you're going to have a problem there. If you have a Windows web server, then you might be okay, but the one we're going to look at isn't, so it wouldn't be okay. Spaces and punctuation are generally troublemakers as well. So Dan's page with an apostrophe and a space there, that might be fine on your local machine, but when you start putting that on the web, or put that up to a web server, it may start to cause trouble. So it's generally a bad idea. You can have HTML or HTM. In the past, Windows machines didn't allow for extensions longer than 3 characters. So HTM was all you had available to you. So that habit stuck for some people. It doesn't really matter what you do as long as you do the same thing all the time and you're consistent and you don't confuse yourself. So you don't want to be saying, well, sometimes it's uppercase, sometimes it's lowercase, I'll go check which I did. You just want to do the same thing all the time. So pick something and run with it. The cool people usually run with all lowercase and with .html. But you can do what you like. As I'm sure you're aware, not everybody codes HTML and CSS from the ground up. There are tools you can use where you lay out the page, the web page that you want, and then you generate the HTML. The software will generate the HTML for you. You can even do that in Microsoft Word. You open up something in Word, you say save as a website or save as a web page, and it'll do that for you. Some of the more sophisticated tools, and even some of the less sophisticated ones, can connect up to the web server directly. So Dreamweaver, for example, is a very commonly used and very, very good web authoring tool. And you could even say to Dreamweaver, look, here's the name of my machine, here's the username and the password, and it'll go ding, 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 and copy everything up to the web for you, and it'll go live. So sometimes the software can do that. Other times, you get the software just to put the website into a folder for you locally on your machine, and then you upload it manually to the web server. Now, in your case, you didn't even have a tool to generate it. You just wrote the HTML and CSS yourself. So those files are sitting on your machine, and if you want them to go live on the web, you have to find a web server somewhere and put them on it. Typically, there are companies who will do that for you. If you wanted to, be real commando, you could set up a web server at home in your bedroom, but that's not really done that much anymore. You can pay someone to host your website for you. So, I saw an introductory offer there with one crowd where it was like $4 a month, entry level. I haven't seen much cheaper than that.
I bought one for $10 a year yesterday.
Yeah?
Yeah. But I can't imagine.
Can't imagine it's much good like
No.
for that price. That's too cheap. You know?
Or like 50 meg bandwidth a month or something.
Hmm?
Or like 50 meg bandwidth a month or something.
Yeah.
Really bad.
I don't know, there may be some scheme as well where it's very cheap, but then if you go over your limit, you're paying a fortune. It could be like some mobile phone company where, you pay very little and then, there's different options. We might even look at those as an exercise, look at different companies and how much they charge and things. But we're not interested in that today. What we're interested in today is the method you use to take the files from your hard disk locally and put them on the web onto a web server somewhere. Now, there's the easy way really and the hard way. A very easy way is you can put a program on your machine that, the easiest possible way is you basically mount the remote machine in some way as a drive, in much the same way that Dropbox appears as a folder on your machine, and you just drag and drop. You can also get programs which would act as intermediaries between you and the remote machine. And so you can drag and drop, and it'll do all the negotiating. You can use a web interface, which is what most of the hosting companies have and what most normal people do. Or you can use file transfer protocol, which is real commando style really at this stage. File transfer protocol is something that's been around on the internet for a very long time. It predates the web by decades, and it's a protocol for transferring files. So you have a file here, you want to put a copy of it somewhere else on a remote machine. We typically use FTP as a verb. So hang on 1 minute now, I'm just going to FTP these files and then I'll be with you and I'll go for coffee. Or I was in the middle of FTPing my site from A to B and something happened. Not quite sure how you spell it when is FTPing grammatically correct. Certainly people talk like that. I don't know if you can use it like that. We'd have to consult a dictionary somewhere. This here is a screenshot from a hosting company called HostCentric. And so you can see there you have the home directory at the top, and then there's different folders, and inside in those folders you can have files. And then you could upload a file to a folder. It appears not unlike when you say uploading a picture to Facebook. you know, you say upload, and then you go find the file on your machine and you click open or OK, and then it goes up. The only thing is on Facebook, you're not going to see the actual directory structure that it goes into. So this here, for example, whatever this website was, you'd go blah blah blah.com /azulejos/blue.html would be the name of that file on the web. So the directory structure is mirrored in the path. And then there's the old school way, which is using FTP. Typically, the web server is running Unix. Unix is the operating system on which most of the internet runs. So you may have seen, have you done any messing with routers yet? And have you had to use Unix for that? Were you actually talking to the router in command line and telling it to do things? No? Okay, okay. So many of the machines running the internet, be they routers or web servers, are Unix machines. Unix was an operating system devised in the 1960s in Berkeley, and it's one of the main operating systems. No, it's not terribly popular as a desktop operating system. I mean, Windows would be the main one there. But for the infrastructure of the internet, Unix is the main one. Yes, Macs run Unix underneath. Android is Unix underneath. Linux is a form of Unix. So to talk then to the remote server, there are commands you can use to copy your files from A to B, from your local machine to the remote server. Now it's a command line interface, so it's a bit clunky and it's a bit cryptic. We're very used to dragging and dropping. But I want you to do this, or I want you to have done this at least once in your life, just so you can see how it works. And any of the tools that you would download, or any of the authoring tools that are communicating with the web server, they would be generating this code on your behalf and negotiating with the remote server. But you're going to do it manually. So I'm not in this class going to cover Unix per se. I'm only going to cover the Unix commands that you need to do in FTP. So the main one is ls, which lists the files in the directory. So if you're in Windows, that's dir to do a directory listing. But you probably don't do that either anymore. In Unix, it's ls. So ls will tell you all of the files and directories in the folder that you're currently in. Now, you have to get used to the idea of you being somewhere. So you're in a particular folder, a particular directory is current at any particular time. When you're in the command line interface, it's not like you have 10 windows open and you can hop from window to window. In the command line interface, you're in one place at any one time. And you can move around, but the commands you issue will be relative to that one place. MV will move a file from one place to another. In this case, we're actually using MV to rename the file, which is a bit confusing. But basically, you MV, give the name of the file, and give the place you want it to go. So normally there would be some sort of a path there in the second file name, because obviously moving a file from where it is to where it is already doesn't make a lot of sense. CP will copy a file, so you could say cp file1.html, file2.html, and then you'd have two copies of the same thing. The second one will be called file2.html, and rm will delete a file. So rm file1.html will delete file1. You can have wildcards in Unix, which is one of the reasons why you might do an FTP instead of using the web interface. So rm-dan*.html will delete dan1.html, it will delete danny2.html, it'll delete daniel.html. No, it won't delete daniel.htm, for example. So that asterisk there is a wildcard. Now, so in Unix then, you can navigate around the directory structure using these three commands. So make dir will make a new directory. So you're going to log into a web server and you're going to make a folder, make a directory in which to house your website. So make dir makes a new directory. rmdir, remove directory, that's going to delete a directory. Now some machines will actually insist that you delete everything in the directory first before you do that, just as a kind of a precaution.
So when you're doing that, right, so you say if you want to delete a directory, then somebody you do rm-rf, you know, and that's kind of like that's a very like a sledgehammer way to do it.
rm-dir now, or so you're going back to rm.
To remove a directory, but you can't do rm-dir for stuff in it. If you want to delete the directory with the stuff, no, all at once go.
Yeah, you say rm*.star would delete everything in it, and then you could delete it.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Because dash rf does it as well, but I mean, that's very like.
Perhaps it does. I'm not by no means a Unix guru. In fact, that's not even guru level. That's probably very basic. I don't know much about Unix. I'm only using Unix for FTPing. I don't use it for anything else. I'm not even that comfortable in it. With it, I'll show you some of the things I do just to keep it clear in my head, because it could wreck your head. I don't know what that does. That does everything without asking, yeah?
Recursively and forces delete. Like this.
All right.
You can't force or remove directory. Because when you said there star.
Well, if you had subdirectories, you see, if you did rm*.star, you probably wouldn't be removing the subdirectories. You'd just be removing all the files. So you'd still have directories in there. So then you have to go in there, and so there may be a way to just do the whole lot. I would advise against that, just because that's a great way to delete everything by accident.
That's why I was asking. It's very.
No, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to want to do. I would just never do it. I'd be too worried. Now, cd then changes the directory. So you can say cd my site will move from the current directory into the subdirectory called my site. Now, the trick then to being a Unix ninja really is to get to grips with paths. So you can be in one folder and specify 3 or 4 subdirectories down if you get the paths right. So often you don't have to go to the directory you want to talk about. So if I want to copy something from here to here, what I do personally is I usually go to where the file is that I want to copy, and then I copy it to the place I want it to go using the longer path. But actually, you could be anywhere and just specify the file and then specify where you want it to go, and you're done. So I might, for example, be in a directory called Europe. And when I look in there, I might see Ireland, France, Spain, Germany. And if I do ls Ireland/Cork/Ballincollig, that's going to do a listing of all of the files in the Ballincollig directory. We say directories in Unix. Folder wants to come out of my mouth every time, so I'm using the word folder and directory interchangeably. cd ... will move you up a level. So if you're in the Ballincollig folder and you did cd ... then you'd be in the Cork directory. And if you did an ls there, you might see Ballincollig, Douglas, Bishopstown, whatever. Let's imagine that I'm in the Pablo Honey directory and I want to move to the Zuropa directory. Actually, sorry, no. That's correct. My apologies. So I want to go straight from Pablo Honey to Zuropa. Well, one thing I could do, if I wanted to go the long way, I could say cd ... and then I'd be in the Radiohead directory. And then I could say cd ... again, and then I'd be in the music directory. Then I could say cd u2, I'd be in the u2 directory, and then cd Zuropa, and I'd be in the Zuropa directory. But I could just say, if I was in Pablo Honey, I could say cd ... // u2 / Zuropa / and go ding, 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 and be there. Now, relative paths like that usually wreck people's heads, but it's important to know that it's doable anyway. I would never do that, actually. I would just go the long way, just so I make sure I know where I'm going. PWD tells you what directory you're in, and that's the number one thing I type when I'm doing something like this, just to make sure I'm going someplace. Okay, PWD, where am I? Grand. Okay, next step. Now, so to FTP then, there are special commands that you'd use. With CD we've already seen, but there's LCD, and then there's get and mget, and put and mput. So the first thing you need to do is you need to be in the command line of your own machine. So that might be these machines here. You'd have to go to, what's it called, terminal, or is it called control or console? Terminal. And so you could start an FTP session. So you could say FTP, and then you're running the FTP program. And then from there, you could say open myserver.com. Or you could just say FTP myserver.com and go straight. It'll open then as well. So you'd say open and then the name of the machine that you're going to transfer the files to. There was a thing called anonymous FTP, which is still possible, but you don't see it as much. But in the days before the web, if you wanted to publicize something, you'd put it on a web server, you'd put it on an FTP server that allowed people to log in anonymously and transfer files down. You don't see anonymous FTP so much now. So you'll be prompted then for a username and for a password. And for the exercise you're going to do, I'm going to give you a name of the machine and the username and the password. But I'm not going to put that on the blog. Now, so the plan then is to go to the folder on the local machine and transfer your files from there to the appropriate folder on the remote machine. I usually set up the remote machine first, find the folder there, and then go to the local machine and find the folder there, and then do the transfer. You could use paths to just from wherever you are do the business, but I like to actually go and navigate down the directory structure to get where I'm going. So CD will navigate on the remote machine when you're in an FTP session, and LCD will navigate on the local machine. LS navigates on the remote machine, and then LLS works on the local machine. Although I had problems with LLS today, actually. I'm not sure what story was there. There are two modes then in FTP. There's ASCII and there's binary. And when you issue the ASCII command, and that's all in lowercase, I'll actually just fix that there so that it appears in lowercase so there's no confusion. So the ASCII command switches the default transfer mode to ASCII. And you use ASCII for the HTML files and the CSS files. Any text files or text documents. Whereas binary then you use for images or audio files or maybe video files or Flash, for example, something like that would be an I. No. So get will take the files from the remote server and copy them to the local machine. So if you say get my page 1, it'll take my page 1 from the remote machine and put a copy on your local machine. And if you don't specify paths, you'll be dealing with the current directories in each case. You could in fact even say get my page 1.html front.html, and while it's copying it over, it'll also give it a new name. But I would think that's a very insane thing to do. You could cause a lot of confusion for yourself, but that is possible. So what mget does then is it'll do that multiple times. So you could say mget d*.html, and then it'll copy from the web server all of the pages that begin with D, have blah 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 .html, and copy all those from the remote server to the local server. Sometimes it's a yes/no prompt where you have to say yes to each one. And you can add some commands to that to stop that if you want. Now put is what you guys are going to be doing today. So you're going to put files from the local directory to the remote directory. And that's then how you'd upload your web pages to the server. Mput will put multiple files. So you could say mput star would copy everything from the current directory to the remote directory. But you'd probably do something like mput star.html, for example. And that would take all the HTML files from that local directory and put them on the remote directory. At the end then you need to quit the session. FTP isn't terribly secure actually. So you don't want to be leaving that connection open unnecessarily. And the stuff that's going in transit is not going to be especially secure. So you need to bear that in mind. So you need to quit out of that then. I'm not sure what the difference between exit, quit, and buy. It may be that one will quit the current, disconnect you from the server, the remote server, but leave you in the FTP session so you can go somewhere else. But if you quit out of it, you can always just launch FTP again and away you go if you need to go somewhere else. So what I'll do now is I'll actually try and do that live, which is always a bad idea in class. And we'll see if we do that. It may be that the Wi-Fi, actually I'm fairly confident the Wi-Fi won't allow me to do an FTP session for security reasons. But I did it this morning, so I know it works. So I can give you the details of the machine anyway. And you can take note of the username and password. Okay?